Welcome to round 2 of the Donaldson Cross Country Championship, the Vredefort Super Sprint. More than 40 national competitors, 2 different categories of vehicles, and an innovative short course format featuring 200 kilometers of fast-paced action. And as always, there was plenty of drama along the way. This is cross-country racing at its finest, and here are the details of what turned out to be a truly spectacular event. The Free State town of Vredefort is moderately famous for its dome, the 300-kilometer wide impact crater that scientists say was caused when a meteor slammed into the Earth a mere 2,000 million years ago. In 2016, however, all of that proved pretty dull compared to the spectacular Vredefort Super Sprint, which took place on May the 7th, right in the heart of the meteor's ground zero. But instead of a mountain of frozen rock, it was more than 40 cross-country competitors that shook the Earth this time. And since there weren't many spectators back in the meteor's day, we reckon it's fair to say that the race, round 2 of the 2016 Donaldson Cross Country Championship, was a much bigger hit with the fans. The inaugural Vredefort Sprint was based around the farm Witval, belonging to Koos du Plessis and his family. It featured an innovative one-day format that saw the crews start the race based on their positions in the national seedings. The morning's racing consisted of a 100-kilometer loop, with crews starting 2 minutes apart. This was followed by the traditional 20-minute service, after which all the cars were sequestered into a holding area until 1:30. During the break, the crews mingled with the fans, signed race posters, and relaxed until it was time to restart. At that point, a second loop was run, this time with the crews starting in the order of their times on the first loop, with the fastest crews heading off into the Free State landscape first. At the end of the loop, each crew's total running time was added up, and the fastest crews in each category were pronounced as winners. Short, sweet, and easy to spectate, but the format also challenged the competitors, who are more used to significantly longer endurance-type events. Speaking of the competitors, let's take a moment to see who has done what so far in the season. 3 classes make up the production vehicle category in this year's championship. Class T, the premier class for South African spec vehicles, where Jason Venter took the first win of the season, behind the wheel of his 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. Class S, which caters for vehicles with engines up to 4 litres, had no finishes at round 1. But it was the 2 FIA spec Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hiluxes that set the early pace for the season. Leroy Polder was the man of the moment at the RFS Endurance in Vryburg, and he was looking forward to testing the new race format of the Vredefort Super Sprint.
Yeah, I think we've had a good result in the last one. I think this one, Anthony, is going to be right behind us, and it's a little bit different this event. It's not who finishes first on the road, it's time from A to B, so now this one's going to be very different.
The special vehicle category features 2 classes, namely Class A for the top spec vehicles with engines bigger than 4 litres and Class P for vehicles with engines up to 4 litres. In Class P, it was Willem de Tooy who reaped the first rewards of the season, leading John Thompson by 7 points. The battle for supremacy in Class A, however, has already proved to be a tough one. As it stands, defending champion Evan Hutchison tops the charts, with Cyril van Biljon and Keith McInerney behind him. McInerney drove to his first podium in Vryburg, but Hutchinson is no stranger to the top step and was looking forward to taking on the Vredefort Super Sprint.
Yeah, it's a bit of a balance between we've got some points in the bag, so we don't have to take too many chances, but at the same time we want to win.
In addition to the shorter format, the Vredefort Super Sprint also brought a new feature in the form of the CRT Challenge. Century Racing produces the popular CRT race vehicle as an entry point into the world of cross-country racing, and they've decided to make things a bit more interesting for the CRT competitors in 2016.
We want to now start the CRT Challenge, meaning that whoever is going to win we're going to be the first CRT to cross the line. Today will win a free entry for the next event, which will be Desert Race.
The CRTs are proving very attractive to newcomers to the sport, including a couple of stars from other disciplines. On the Vredefort Super Sprint, it was South African quad racing superstar Brian Baragwanath who slid behind the wheel of the CRT for the first time. Baragwanath finished third overall in this year's quad category for the Dakar Rally and was itching to experience cross-country motor racing too. So now you know who the key players are and where they stand in the championship. The scene is set, and we reckon it's time for action. So join us after the break for all of the thrills and spills of the production vehicles as we see what happened at the first ever Vredefort Super Sprint.
These are the classics from Porsche, cars that write race sports history. The 356, the 550 Spider, and the 917. None is faster, none is more reliable, and none is more successful. They make Porsche #1 in motorsports in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There's hardly a race and barely a rally that Porsche does not win.
Welcome back to the Vredefort Super Sprint, round 2 of the 2016 Donaldson Championship. The Super Sprint format means that there was no qualifying race on round 2, with crews starting instead, based on their positions on the national seeding list. This meant that defending champions Leroy Poulter and navigator Rob Howie had to open the route in the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux, followed 2 minutes later by teammates and former champions Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy. Two Class FIA vehicles have shown amazing pace early in the season and were the odds-on favourites to win the first loop. They were followed off the line by the first of the Class T vehicles, the Atlas Copco Volkswagen Amarok, in the hands of Gary Berthold and former champion rally navigator Pierre Aries. Class T is the premier class for SA spec vehicles in the championship and features a veritable armada of fast crews. Berthold was followed off the line by Malalan Toyota's Johan and Werner Horn with the blisteringly quick RFS VW Amarok of Christian Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vuren hot on their heels. Chris Visser and navigator Ward Huxtable were up next in their NWM Ford Ranger with teammates Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer starting behind them. Redline Motorsports' Johan van Staden and Navi Mike Lawrenson went off next, with 4x4 Megaworld's Jason Fenter and Vince van Alleman taking on the route behind them. Henny de Klerk is another extremely fast driver, though some woes with his Treasury 1 BMW X3 saw him slide down the seeding order. However, with new navigator Adrian Roots beside him, de Klerk could prove to be the man on the move up the order. Jannie Visser and Chris Visser Jr. were the first Class S crew to tackle the Super Sprint, and they were followed by Jürgen and Max Schroeder in the FIA spec Nissan Navara. Behind them came Redline Motorsports' Terence Marsh, partnered on this event by Donaldson's own Dirk Heffer as navigator in their Nissan Navara. Heini Stumper and navigator Henry Hugo followed in their 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux, with Luke Berta and Andre Vermeulen pulling off next. Sean Wright made a welcome return to the sport in his Redline FIA spec Nissan Navara, while newcomers Otto and Ronald Craven, each driving Toyota Hiluxes, completed the lineup for the production vehicles. It was a great field, featuring a mix of old and new crews, 3 different classes, and the promise of plenty more action, and it didn't take long for things to start heating up. By the time the first production vehicle screened past the camera at the 40-kilometer mark, it was clear that the Class T Ford Ranger of Chris Visser was going like the proverbial bat out of hell. The Ford crew had said that their steed felt frisky before the start of the race, and their pace was bearing that out. Teammate Gareth Woolridge was also looking strong, while the RFS Amarok of Christian Deploy seemed fast and composed, exactly what they needed after a DNF on the opening round. But it was the two FIA spec Toyota Gazoo racing SA Hiluxes that were likely to make the biggest impact on the Vredefort Super Sprint. And at the 86-kilometer mark, it looked as if Poulter would take the win on the opening loop. Teammate Taylor was just further back, but also very much in contention at the top of the field. By the time the crews completed the first 100-kilometer loop, a surprising picture emerged. Let's start with the Class S competitors. It was Heini Stamfer and Henry Hugo who went fastest on the opening loop, posting a time of 1 hour, 6 minutes and 6 seconds, pipping not only other Class S crews, but a number of Class Ts and even Class FIA crews in the process. The biggest upset of the morning befell Henny de Klerk driving car T18, the Treasury 1 BMW. De Klerk and new navigator Adrian Roots approached a triple caution ditch midway through the opening loop. They came in just a touch too hot, entered the ditch sideways, and rolled their vehicle onto its side. They managed to get going again, but not before losing the best part of 10 minutes in the process.
Front window was very badly damaged, but we were able to carry on, but it was tough, you know, difficult to see, lots of dust.
But then came the results at the top of the standings. Fifth fastest on the opening loop was the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux of former champion Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy. Definitely not what the usually consistent pairing expected. But what about teammates and reigning champions Poulter and Howie? The pair posted a time of 1 hour, 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Fast, definitely, but fast enough? Well, not quite as it turned out, as Visser and Huxtable went even faster in their Ford Ranger, beating Poulter by 20 seconds on the first loop.
We had a good result. We're leading and we're looking forward to a second lap. Yeah, I think with this dust caps it makes it a little bit more fair.
This meant that Visser was not only the fastest Class T driver, but also the fastest in the overall standings. His teammate Gareth Woolridge set the second fastest time in Class T, with the RFS Amarok of Christian Deploy going third fastest in class. Jason Fenter also had a good loop, whilst Luke Borter was the fastest of the Redline Motorsport crews, posting a time of 1 hour, 4 minutes and 41 seconds. But the race was only at its midpoint, and after the obligatory 20-minute service, the crews enjoyed a bit more time off, signing posters and mingling with the fans before tackling the same route for the second time. Before getting back in his Toyota Hilux, Poulter gave us his thoughts on the opening loop.
Yeah, opening the road here was a little bit more difficult than we thought. There was a lot of grass here, so very slippery in a lot of the tight corners.
Loop 2 of the Vredefort Super Sprint got underway at 1:30 and competitors again went off in 2-minute intervals. This time, however, they set off in order of the times that they set on Loop 1, with the fastest crews going off first. And it was Chris Visser who took to the course first, defending his lead of 20 seconds over Poulter. A big ask to hold off the hard-charging Poulter, but if ever there was anyone that could do it, it was Visser. But it would be another hour before the results came in, and in the meantime, there was still a lot to fight for further down the order. Woolridge and Deploy were all over each other, with Jason Fenter just a touch behind them. Gary Berthold wasn't about to give up either, and that's not forgetting about multiple champion Anthony Taylor at this point. That would be silly. And don't forget about the crews in Class S either, where Heini Stamfer held a lead of 1 minute 24 over Otto Graven, so anything could still happen. And happen it certainly did. 55 kilometers into the loop, and it was clear that Visser was struggling to hold onto his lead. It was equally clear, however, that Taylor was digging deep for extra pace, and that the battle in Class T was mayhem. Woolridge, Deploy and Fenter were having a ding-dong battle, with the Horn brothers pushing hard to make up for lost time on Loop 1. It was a frenzied, dust-filled affair, and because of the race format, the spectators had to wait for the final results to be calculated, rather than seeing the winner cross the line first, as usual. But as always, the dust did settle, and once the calculations were done, it was the name of Heine Stamfer that topped the standings in Class S. A great result for the veteran, but all eyes quickly turned to the crews at the head of the field. Visser was in a strong position at the start of the loop, and he posted a time of 1 hour and 31 seconds in his Class T Ford Ranger. But then Poulter put in a time of 59 minutes on the nose, leapfrogging the Ford and charging straight to the top of the podium. But there was more bad news for Visser. Anthony Taylor in the second Toyota Gazoo Racing Hilux had gone even faster than Poulter on lap 2, pipping his teammate by 19 seconds and moving up from 5th at the start of the loop to 2nd overall at the end of the day. It was undeniably the drive of the day and gave Toyota a 1-2 finish in Class FIA, with Terence Marsh rounding out that podium. In the Class Ts, it was Visser who topped the table, followed by Deploy and Woolridge, with Fenter just missing out on the podium. Join us after the break for all of the details of the race for the special vehicles.
Combine the words SUV and adventure, and you get one of the most exciting driving experiences in the Arab world, the SU Venture. On this program, you'll see off-road legend Duncan Barber taking a group of fearless men into the breathtaking deserts and mountains of Oman to test the off-road capabilities of the Mercedes-Benz SUV range.
Those who seem to defy gravity and disobey the laws of physics have to be a rather special group of people. Astronauts in space, acrobats in a circus, but last but not least, rally drivers belong to this unusual group. They can do things which are absolutely unbelievable for us normal mortals.
Welcome back to cross-country motor racing at its very best, where crews in the special vehicle category were taking on the exciting Vredefort Super Sprint. As was the case in the production cars, the national seeding order also determined the starting order for the first of the 2 special vehicle races here in Vredefort. Seeding is much like a handicap in golf, and as the crews with the lowest handicap or higher seeding, it was up to defending champions Evan Hutchison and Danny Starson in their motorized bat to get the proverbial show on the road. After successfully completing the 2016 Dakar, Century Racing's Mark Corbett and Jean Moore made a welcome return to local soil. But the return proved to be very unlucky for Corbett when he was forced to park his CR5 car on the side of the road.
I think after all the hype of Dakar and all the other events, you make a simple mistake. The guys obviously forgot to refuel the car this morning. There's a bit of misunderstanding between a few guys, and we went out and unfortunately 50 k's in, that was it.
Just minutes later, Quinton and father Cully Salwood's motorized bat passed the stricken CR5 on the side of the road. Whilst Big Man, Cyril van Biljoen and co-driver Philip Hurselman got their race underway behind the wheel of the Atlas Copco bat. Special vehicle motor racing is serious business, with a number of fast drivers in impressive race cars setting off in their quest to chase Vredefort's Super Sprint victory. And speaking of impressive machines, the Cobalt Striker of Jimmy Zahos and co-driver Zahir Boranya was the next car to set off into the Free State fields. Closely followed by Australian Safari winner Dave McShane and Leander Pinar in a Fox-sponsored bat. The Zarco of defending Class P champion John Thompson and Maurice Zamatin was also the first Class P vehicle to set off into the Vredefort Super Sprint, and they were closely followed by yet another bat, this one driven by husband and wife, Marius and Yolanda Farid. How you set off on a short 100-kilometer sprint race is one thing, but it's how you arrive at the finish that really counts. Brian Baragwanath reached the end of the first race, 4th in Class P, but he was leading the CRT Challenge on his debut into car racing. Baragwanath had around 38 seconds between himself and provisional Class P third place man Werner Kennedy, while only 1 second separated Kennedy's ace co from the Zarco of Nick Hosler, who completed his first loop in a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes and 12 seconds. Good enough for a provisional second position in Class P. But it wasn't good enough to match John Thompson, whose time of 1 hour and 9 minutes flat handed him the Class P lead at the halfway mark of the Vredefort Super Sprint. The Class A battle up front was furious, with the father and daughter pairing of Kutsia and Sandra Labiskakny taking just 1 hour, 7 minutes and 37 seconds to complete race 1. But that was only good enough for a provisional 8th place, as it took the bat of Lawrence and Karin Boysen 32 seconds less. Consistency was once again the name of the game for husband and wife Marius and Yolanda Fourie in the PHP bat as they reached the halfway mark in 6th, less than a minute slower than the intimidating Cobalt striker of Jimmy Zahos, who occupied a provisional 5th place at the halfway marker. Zahos came within just 8 seconds of 4th place, but this belonged to Quinton Solwald, who had a steady and safe run in the Motorride bat. But the surprise of race 1 had to be the Chenauth of Stefan van Kletsen and co-driver Jaco Pieterse, who not only finished the first 100 kilometers in 3rd place, but came just within 35 seconds of stealing 2nd place from race favourite and defending champion Evan Hutchinson. But in Hutchinson's defence, as he was the first special vehicle to tackle the route, he also had to find the road in sections, and that could have cost him a vital few seconds. But all of this, however, was for 2nd place, which meant that none other than Big Sorrel van Biljoen and Philip Hosselman were victors in race 1. The Atlas Copco bat took the provisional lead by almost a full minute and placed them in pole position for the second half of the event.
But it was lucky out there. We went fast. I enjoyed.
Confirmation of Sorrel van Biljoen's brilliant performance on race 1, around a minute ahead of Hutchison. It was tight between Van Kletsen in 3rd, Solwald in 4th, and Zahos in 5th. Back at the service park on the farm Witwal, crews could attend to the used and abused race cars. Drivers and navigators mingled with their fans, whilst also restoring their own energy levels in preparation for race 2. This is where Dakar star Brian Baragwanath reflected on the differences between a quad and a car with a roof.
Oh, it's totally different. It's really cool. Everything's high speed. Everything's you really got to set the car up. You really got to set up in the corners. You really got to use 3 dimensions of your brain to get the car ready for the corner.
After a welcome break, it was time to swap the festive atmosphere of the DSP for helmets, safety belts, and steering wheels once again. The positions after race 1 determined the start order for race 2, so it was Sorrel van Biljoen who led the way ahead of the hard-charging Evan Hutchison. 2 minutes later, Stefan van Kletsen pulled off, followed by Quinton Solwald and Jimmy Zahos. "100 kilometers in cross-country terms is not much, and before you could say 100 kilometers, it was time to count down the top teams as they arrived at the finish. Brian Baragwanath proved his talent applied to both machines with steering wheels and handlebars, as he claimed both 3rd in Class P as well as the win in the CRT Challenge. Reigning Class P champion John Thompson was hampered by an overheating problem, but not even this could prevent him from fighting for yet another class win. This time, however, he had no choice but to be content with 2nd place, as the Class P spoils went to national newcomers Werner Kennedy and Tina Sventer in the Ace Co, who took their first ever class win in cross-country racing. Ahead of the Class P victors, the Class A results proved that cross-country racing is very much a family affair. A fierce battle for the top placings raged between father and daughter, Kutsia and Sandra Labiskakny, husband and wife, Lawrence and Karin Boysen, and another husband and wife in the form of Marius and Yolanda Fourie. After 200 kilometers of flat-out gravel racing across the Vredefort Dome, the PHB bat of Marius Fourie won the battle of the cross-country families by beating the similar car of Lawrence Boysen by around 2 minutes, whilst the Labiskaknys reached the finish a further 30-odd seconds back. So that settled the 4th, 5th and 6th places respectively. But what about the fight for the coveted podium positions? Remember, it started off as a dice between Van Biljoen, Hutchison and Van Kletsen, with Solwald and Zahos making up the top 5. The question that everyone wanted answered was simple. Could Hutchison catch the flying Sorrel van Biljoen? and the answer came early in the final race. It was a no, he couldn't. The motorized back broke an engine belt and robbed them of any chance of victory. So this meant that Cyril van Biljoen had a chance to romp off to take a flag-to-flag victory. But this too did not happen. Within just 15 kilometers of the finish line, the Atlas Copco bat broke a side shaft, reducing Van Biljoen and Hurselman to spectators for the final moments of the race. Heartbreak for the big man. These retirements then opened the door for Van Pletsen, who grabbed the opportunity with both hands to claim his first ever podium position, and that behind the wheel of a somewhat aging car. At the start of race 2, the difference between Quinton Solwald and Jimmy Zahos was a mere 8 seconds, and unbeknownst to both of them, their fight now had turned into a battle for overall victory. Neither was willing to give an inch, as they both bettered their times from race 1 by more than 3 minutes in an epic battle and bitter fight to the end. Solwald beat his rival by the narrowest of margins on race 2, taking the overall victory by as little as 12 seconds. Proof then of Quinton Solwald's victory just 12 seconds ahead of Jimmy Zahos, while third was a career best for Stefan Van Pletsen, and a maiden win for Kennedy in Class P, ahead of defending champion Thompson, and an impressive debut for our quad crossover Brian Baragwanath. So a maiden podium finish for Stefan Van Pletsen and Jaco Pieterse, and a very welcome return to the podium for Jimmy Zahos and Zahir Boranya, who were bitterly disappointed to miss out on the spoils in round number 1. The biggest smiles, however, had to belong to Quinton Solwald and his father Kali. They didn't quite make the podium upon their return to the sport earlier this year, but at Vredefort Super Sprint, it was all smiles and lots of bubbly spraying by the Solwalds. Welcome back to the top.
Big thanks to Motorride, fantastic team, and I'm just glad that we got the first win under the belt for them.
In the race for production vehicles, it was former champion Chris Visser and Nabby Ward Huxtable who had a very big reason to smile.
It's a victory for us in Class P, and after we had some troubles in the first race, we came third now, first, so we're there, so we win the Anfield Championship at the moment.
But in the end, it was the pace of the 2 FIA spec Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hiluxes that took them right to the top of the standings, despite trailing at the midpoint. Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy might have set the fastest time on Loop 2, but they had to settle for second place overall, just behind Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie in an identical vehicle, who recorded a stunning back-to-back victory.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, the format being changed today made us work the whole day, especially the second loop. We knew we had to catch Chris, and if we could just get right up to his back bumper, we knew we could win. So, good day again for the championship.
From the shortest race on the 2016 calendar to the longest we go. Next up in the season is the spectacular Toyota 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race. A mammoth 3-day event with a total race distance of 1,000 kilometers. As on the last 2 runnings, the 2016 race will again be based at the town of Jwaneng in southern Botswana and promises to be every bit as spectacular as it has always been. The Desert Race, as it's known, has a reputation as being the biggest and baddest of the races in the Donaldson Championship. And to the tens of thousands of spectators that flock to the race each year, it has become a kind of pilgrimage, one that every cross-country fan should do at least once in his or her life. While we build up towards the big one, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for your daily cross-country racing fix. All of this action from the Donaldson Cross Country Championship was brought to you by Donaldson, Force Fuel, Ford, Toyota, and Tire Rack.